5, 6, 7, 8.
Broadway. We're just a bunch of Broadway babies.
Stomping 42nd Street.
Yeah. All right, exactly. Here we go.
That's how the song goes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Gilmore to Say with Tara and Haley. I'm Tara. This is Haley. Hi, Haley.
Hi, Tara. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Happy belated birthday.
My birthday was yesterday. Not when we're recording this, but
I know.
When it airs.
In the realm of us acting like we are
in the
coming to you live
world.
from this day.
Like we are coming to you live. Like we're
yesterday.
on Broadway ourselves, which is a little hint to what today's episode is going to be about, which I'm really excited to share with you all. I'm very giddy. But I'm so excited as well because, again, at this point, I haven't gone yet, but we'll have just gotten back, or I'll have just gotten back from Atlanta, where I was able to see your family and meet members of your family I haven't met yet and see where you grew
truly,
up.
you're going to meet like the whole fam.
I know.
Like all of them.
So
it's going to be so exciting. We'll recap that in the next episode because, of course, we haven't done such yet.
Imagine if we could recap it right now.
Wow.
That would be freaky.
That'd be crazy.
Spooky.
But next episode, we'll recap Atlanta and us being together and Tara coming to my home, which has been Christmasified.
Oh, I can't
Christmas
wait.
town, if you will. Tara's got a little Christmas town going.
I did. I put my Christmas tree up. A bunch of boxes are still over here because I'm still unpacking, still, settling into my new home. But I put my Christmas tree up and I'm very excited. And I'm excited to also put a Christmas tree up with Brett in the living room once Thanksgiving has passed.
After
Thanksgiving, very important. But he loves the tree. Yeah. He was like, it's so cute. It's got disco balls on it. And I just love, I love a little vintagey feel to my Christmas tree. I always have like these very like intricate like ornaments from Anthropology and TJ Maxx and just like really fun.
So you.
Thanks. We're going to get a real Christmas tree for the living room, which will be a lot of fun. And I saved my my childhood ornaments that my mom sent me to put on that tree. So this is like the aesthetic tree. And then the one that's going to go in the living room is just going to be like, good old fashioned childhood Christmas tree. I don't know. It has like those fun, like homemade ornaments on it. I can't wait.
I love that.
Yeah.
My mom puts those on the back of the tree now because she's a bit of a tree decorator.
Yeah, it's an aesthetic
loves
thing. Yeah, that's so fun.
She's an aesthetic girly. You'll see when you come down.
Oh, I can't wait.
But you also have gone to your first NFL football game this past weekend.
It's true.
Which you've not yet been to.
Have not yet been to, but I think I had a good time. Brett's dad and stepmom were in town this past weekend, and they will have taken us to a Saints game, which I'm really excited about. I hope that I was warm. I don't know.
We also hope the same for you.
But last year's episode was all about the Lorelai year. This year, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for my birthday, especially because I feel like 32 felt like such a monumentous, like, oh, this is the Lorelai year, right? So what do we do for 33? And similarly to what we did for the subject of your birthday episode last week, we asked our besties on Instagram, hey, like, what should we do? What should Tara do for her birthday episode? And a lot of people wanted to hear about my experience working on Broadway because as many of you know, if you don't know, I work on Broadway still part-time and have been in the Broadway scene for the last 10, 11 years. You have also worked on Broadway, and we've talked about that a lot in just kind of passing over the last 3 years that we've been doing this. And that's also how we connected. And so people wanted to hear about that experience and that side of, what I do, what you've done. And I thought it would be really, really cool to tie that into Gilmore Girls because so many of the actors and even the creator of Gilmore Girls have ties to theater and to Broadway. So I thought that would be really cool to talk about today.
Yeah. And of course, because of that, it ties into the show so much.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Like not just the people that work on it, but like it's then implemented to the show in so many ways, like the musical. In the revival, for example.
100%.
But it is weaved in so many different ways throughout the show itself.
Yeah. So I know that I did a solo episode on just myself. Tara Out of Water. This was, oh my gosh. Like
COVID era
when Haley was in her COVID era. Yeah, it was like early last summer.
I got back from Europe.
Yes, you did.
I came back with COVID.
That's right. God, terrible. You had such a bad experience with COVID.
It was really bad.
It was brutal. But I ended up doing a solo episode, and I shared some of my experience working on Broadway. So if you want to listen to the full breakdown of that, that's Terra Out of Water. That's what the episode is called. I think it's from June of 2023. July? When was the wedding?
It was June, July. Yeah, it was something like that.
Oh, okay. When was the wedding?
End of June.
Oh, okay. So it definitely was July. It was July.
It's either the last episode of June or the first episode of July.
Yeah,
it's
one of the two. It's somewhere around there. It's
Yeah.
called Terra Out of Water if you want to hear like a detailed kind of breakdown of my history of working on Broadway. But I started doing costumes for Broadway and off-Broadway shows shortly after moving here in 2014. And I've kept that as kind of my dual career in also my pursuit of performing, which I've also performed a lot here in New York, and then kind of got into writing, and now am podcasting, but still keeping my foot in the door over there. So currently I'm working at Water for Elephants, which closed by the time this airs. It will have closed on Sunday, December 8th. And then I'm also, I know it's such a bummer. It's such a beautiful show. I really wish you could have seen it. I think you would have really liked it. It's a beautiful, beautiful show. I love that book. I heard the movie was not so great.
I don't mind the movie.
You don't mind the movie?
Robert Pattinson and Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah, I heard it was okay, but people love the book.
I love the book.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful stage production. And then I'm also currently working at Once Upon a Mattress, which is closing this week that we're recording this, November 30th. And we'll have more to say on that a little later. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit more about what you did on Broadway when you were living here and working in a Broadway producer's office.
Yeah, so I got started in, of course, stage management. I don't know why I say of course, but that was kind of what I did in college, was working in stage management. It was never on stage. Wasn't my thing. The first time I ever got on stage in terms of like doing a production where I was not behind the scenes was our show, like holding the mic.
Really?
Or actually, I guess it was at Fan Fest, but it was then our show because I was like holding the mic, didn't know how to talk into it, didn't know what I was doing.
I thought you did great.
Thank you so much. Because I had always been behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But that's what I started with. I started down at the Public Theater as a stage management intern, and I was working on a show called The Total Bent, which was so much fun. I met so many wonderful people. That was when I was working with Vondi Curtis Hall, who wrote Glitter, or not who wrote Glitter, but who directed Glitter.
That's so funny.
If you guys, I don't know who did this, but if you guys go on the Wikipedia page for the movie Glitter and see who wrote it, I don't know who did this, but it literally says that Jess Mariano wrote the screenplay for Glitter.
It 1000% says that.
Yeah, because someone sent that to me, and I was like, I looked at this and I was like, did they say this because the person who wrote the screenplay to Glitter is actually Jess Mariano?
Nope.
And I clicked on it, and nope. It's just Mariano from Gilmore Girls pops up. And I wonder if it's just like such like a low trafficked page that like no one has ever like changed it.
Corrected
but
it.
It like literally says that it was directed by Vondi Curtis Hall. Wonderfully great man. Loved him so much. And underneath it, screenplay by Jess Mariano. If Jess has been on Broadway.
That is,
or I guess that's not Broadway. That literally
amazing.
is the film industry. But
it is, but
truly
hilarious.
Crazy. But from there, you just like kind of meet people.
Totally.
You just like someone was like, hey, I liked working with you here. Can you come do this other thing? Can you come over here? And so like slowly like ended up in working in all these different productions, always in stage management, always underpaid. And so I eventually had to like leave because I was like half nannying, half working in theater. And I was like, this is way too much for me. It's very overwhelming. So I left for a second and worked in office management, but always trying to get in at a producer's office. I would do like work here and there for people I had met, but like it was always just like so overwhelming to have a full-time job and work in that. But yeah, I had interviewed for a job that I didn't get, and someone from the office that I ended up working in had reached out asking if they knew of someone who would be a good fit. And they were like, hey, we almost hired this girl. She's really great. So they reached out to me and I interviewed and I got the job within like 2 days because I guess they really needed someone.
Isn't that crazy how those things happen? That's a very similar story to mine as well.
Yeah, I really didn't even look for this job. It's just because I had met so many people. And that's the thing about New York is I got that job or I got connected to the job that I didn't get from a job that I also didn't get.
Yeah.
But it was just because I connected with the people and I was just like, hey, can we talk? Like, I really loved meeting y'all. I went for coffee with these people and I just like stayed in touch with all of these people who like were just genuinely wonderful and just wanted the best for me, but just couldn't fit me into the job that I was applying for. Cause I was always like that other person. Like, they're like, oh, like if it could have been you, but it was this other person got it, but we still like you and we want to help you. And so that's how I ended up with the job, because I got rejected from 2 jobs is how I ended up in this other job. But yeah,
what's meant for you will not miss you.
Exactly. And I worked as an assistant for a couple of months, but at the time they were looking to hire an associate producer in their office. And I helped schedule tons of interviews for this job until one day I just messaged my boss and I was like, hey, I really want to do this. If you have any interest in letting me take over this job and just teaching me what needs to be done, would love it. He said no.
He said no.
He said no. And then slowly it just wasn't working out. And then they decided like, hey, she really wants to do this. So they hired me for the role. I think it was at first as an assistant position, assistant producer. And it was really great because it's so different from what you do day to day. Like, you go in usually in the evening if you're dressing, because you're dressing for the actual production of the show, or you go in during the day and you're working at the theater itself. And I'm doing everything that like funds what you're doing.
Correct.
I'm talking to co-producers and executive producers and getting meetings and going to like 3-hour-long ad meetings to discuss like the aesthetic and branding and image of the show, talking to actors and doing workshops and just doing like the most random of tasks, booking flights for actors to come over for workshops for things that we want to go into production, or researching
it's a lot more
plays that we want.
administrative.
It really is administrative. And it's one of those things of like, it's just the names that are attached to it seem a lot more glitzy, glamour famous, as would happen for anyone that is coming on Broadway. But we did a lot of plays as well. And I really enjoyed the work that we were doing. And it wasn't until the first show that I was working on directly with the office, because like we also worked on Beetlejuice, but we weren't like necessarily like our office wasn't producing on it. My boss was just working on it, so we did a lot of stuff with that, which was really cool. And I got to go to like dress rehearsals and see like early versions of that show, and I went to opening night, and it was just such a fun experience to be attached to a show like that. But I wasn't directly named in it because it was just my office working on it. But what was really cool is the first show that I worked on was a show called The Great Society with Brian Cox from Succession.
Yes.
And what a lovely, kind man. But there was a lot of shows that I was working on prior to that like I came into the office on, like Lifespan of a Fact with Daniel Radcliffe and American Son with Kerry Washington. There was just a lot of cool stuff. She gave me once a red cardinal ornament for Christmas.
Beautiful.
She just sent it to our office. It was like one of those things of like, I did not know her personally, but like I have this little bird from her.
That's so sweet. Love.
But so we were working on a ton of shows, and it was like all administrative stuff, all coordinating things behind the scenes, like just shows that I got to go see. But the first one that I actually worked on was Great Society. And what was super cool was on it, like one of my coworkers was like, Haley, can you do a proofread of this like house board? And I was going through all of like the co-producers' names and was like so intently like doing that. He was like, Haley, I need you to hurry up. And I was like, this is the house board. I want to make sure it gets right. He was like, Haley, just read the main part. And I was like, what am I reading? Like, I'm trying so hard to do this for you.
Yeah.
He was like, Haley, your name's on it. And it was like my first time being on the house board as an associate producer, like listed on there.
So
and he was trying to do something really like
fun,
kind and fun, and surprised me that like I had been promoted from assistant to associate. But I was like trying so hard to like compare every single person's name and make sure that every single letter was correct. And he was like, you're taking too long. And I was like, do you want this to be right? He was like, just look at it. Just read it. And so that was where I found out that I was on the house board for the first time. So that was really cool. And then I did the Sound Inside with Mary Louise Parker, which was really fun because we did a lot of plays. And as I mentioned, But we were going into a new season right as the pandemic was happening.
Yeah.
Like the world was shutting down on the opening of Tracy Letts the Minutes, which we were working on.
Yes, I remember.
And I had my outfit ready. Everything was happening. And we were like, holy shit, everything is stopping. Everything is ending. That was like kind of the moment where I was like, is this what I want to keep doing? Because the whole world had shut down.
Yeah,
of course, Broadway had shut down. The last place that you could be was in a theater. And so I decided to move home after that because while it was a fun time and like there was a lot of really exciting things that were happening, it just wasn't the industry for me. I decided because it was a lot of overwhelming work for me. And I decided, I think we had talked about this in the past, where you kind of see where you're going because you've reached like dream adjacent, because you were like at the peak of someone else's dream, watching what you could have if you worked harder to get to this spot, to get to where they are. And it just wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah, totally.
And I really honestly felt really out of touch from like what you were doing, because like it really was just like an office job.
Yeah.
Working with Broadway names and Broadway shows, that like it never felt like what you were doing. Like when people think of Broadway, that's what tap dancing on the stage. When I tell people that, they're like, oh my God, what show were you in? I was like, none, actually. As it turns out, I was in an office all day and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So I left and went home and started a TikTok.
And here she is. Here she is, boys. Yeah, you know, I think that the glitz and glam of Broadway can seem really exciting. I say that as someone whose dream to perform on Broadway has spanned, 30 plus years of my life. And it's really fascinating to see all of the crevices of show business and understand what it takes to put on a Broadway show, not just from a performer's perspective, but also from a production standpoint. And it's really eye-opening. And for me, similarly, I kind of was like, oh, you know what? I love Broadway. I love theater. It is in like my bloodstream, but I genuinely have other interests that exist outside of this, and allowed me space to do things like what we're doing here, to have podcasts and be a self-starter and wear a lot of different hats. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is that there are a lot of people who were in the Gilmore Girls world who wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like both of our experience helped us do what we're doing now.
Totally. 100%.
And it helped us to have a different eye when we like watch Gilmore Girls, and when we see how, these people who worked on Broadway and like what they brought to the show in general. It's just like a different perspective to have, I think.
So let's get into it. This episode is for the theater nerds. I feel like doing this episode like made me so giddy, because I was like, oh my God, I love learning about like the past of characters that I grew up watching, thinking of them as one specific thing, but realizing how much exists outside, like before, during, and after their time on Gilmore Girls, and how it connects to Broadway and like the theater kid inside of me was really, really fun.
Having such a moment right now too.
Like I know, like especially because of Wicked. Time. Oh my God.
Like I feel like the theater nerd in all of us is being rebirthed and being reborn right now.
100%.
The time of the holidays. So I feel like this is like a perfect time to revisit that within the show too.
Totally. So I want to preface this by saying that like every film actor usually got their start in theater, meaning that like, they did community theater, or they did like high school productions, or, regional theater, whatever.
Yeah.
Before they actually entered the film scene. So we're not going to go through every single actor that's ever been on Gilmore Girls, but there are so many, there are so many actors on this show who were also, just like tethered to Broadway, some who I knew, some who I was surprised to like kind of discover their past, and like the tipping of the scales if they did more TV or if they did more theater. And, so if we don't talk about someone, it doesn't mean they never did theater in their life. It's just that it's not super relevant to kind of what we're talking about today. I kind of wanted to frame this episode as like 6 degrees of separation from Broadway, because like I could honestly
fun.
take any of these actors and make them 6 degrees of separation from like another actor on Broadway, you know, like, or an actor that we had worked with before. But I just thought it would be really cool to kind of share the Broadway history of a lot of these people or their ties to stage performing and some of the fun things they've done. And how they kind of relate to each other. So let's start with the Theater Girly trio of Amy Sherman-Palladino, Lauren Graham, and Kelly Bishop. The thing is we're not going to get super deep into the three of them today because we have episodes about them and their history.
Yeah.
And we just, of course, did a
two-part
series on Kelly Bishop's book, where she went very deep dive into her history with the Broadway stage, her as a ballerina, her connection to Amy in that regard. We also did an episode about Amy. Was that earlier this year? When did we do our Amy Sherman-Palladino episode? That damn Amy Sherman-Palladino.
You could have told me it was last year or this year, and I would have agreed with you. I don't remember. It's there, though. It's called That Damn Amy Sherman-Palladino.
April 4th, 2023. Holy shit. That was
wow.
so
that was
long
last
ago.
year.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh. So we did a deep dive on Amy and the history of where she came from and her theatrical background, her parents' background as like a comedian and a dancer, and the path that she was on. And we also did a deep dive, I think before that, on Lauren Graham's book. Or was that this year? We did that
was this year.
Yeah,
that was this year.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So we've kind of taken some time with these three women who I would argue are like three of the most prominent, with the exception of maybe Sally Struthers and Liz Torres, like the most kind of like theatrical entities of Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
You know?
I would add Ed in that just because that's how that picture of him and Kelly is so iconic.
You're so
from
right.
Their Tony wins.
But it really, it starts at the top of the pyramid, which is Amy Sherman-Palladino. I think that, it's pretty common knowledge, or it has become common knowledge as the internet has expanded, that Amy was, she grew up as a dancer. She comes from a show business family. And then at one point she had kind of like a fork in the road where she could have chosen to be in this production of Cats, which I mentioned in the episode we did about her. Cats was the first Broadway show that I did costumes for. So that was very special for me. But Amy had the opportunity to either do this callback for, I think it was the national tour of Cats, or be a writer on Roseanne. And she chose to be a writer. And
thank God.
Thank God, because what would our lives be if Gilmore Girls was not created?
What would we be doing?
What would we even be doing here? So I love that despite the fact that she chose to be a television writer, she kept the theatrical atmosphere that she was raised on integrated into Gilmore Girls. Like she kept that so like at the forefront,
It's hard not to.
Of course. And not necessarily as like in your face, like it's a musical episode every time you turn around.
No.
But just with the references.
Thank God we never had a musical episode of Gilmore Girls. All I can think about is the one from Grey's Anatomy where like they're all singing and I'm just like,
this is a fever dream.
I wouldn't. No, please, thank you.
I know. But, I do love the way that she incorporates the theater references. As much as we begrudge the musical, she, incorporated a Stars Hollow musical into the revival, which I think the concept of is very fun. And we'll get into that later in the episode. But she has kept like the theatrical references and even just, what she does in season 2 with Runaway Little Boy, the Shakespeare portion of like Rory's, Rory's assignment with Paris and Tristan.
So high school theater.
It's so high school theater, but I love that it's like Shakespeare is thrown into it. Yeah. And then of course, even something like the dance marathon. No, it's not like putting on a show, but it is.
No, but it has a theatricality to it.
Exactly.
I actually think that is it feels really natural because in the same way that like you and I talk, we throw in, so many references as we're talking, like things that we're reminded of. But like at the forefront of our mind so often is theater. We'll make Wicked references, like they'll just like toss it in as we're talking. And it makes so much sense that she would do that too, because that was what she was raised on. And so it just feels like it just comes out naturally. So much of her comes into the show, comes into play, and references and scenes. And like even in the directing of the show feels very, at times, very stage play. Yeah. Very like we're about to burst into song and dance, but we're not going to.
Especially when she does those very lengthy, like one shot takes.
Yeah.
Where she's going through the town and everything has to be staged so perfectly in order to work. Yeah. That is live theater,
Yeah.
I I think it's so cool.
Also, the way that she creates an ensemble of like an Amy Sherman-Palladino ensemble from Gilmore Girls to Bunheads to Maisel, you see those same actors show up again and again. That she has a theater troupe almost.
She really does.
Works with.
Yeah. And speaking of Maisel, I think when you and I watched that, we really get into it because it was shot here and because so many of the people who were in that show, whether they were background or like, you know, came in as guest stars or were even
Tara.
Also me. But so many people who actually like danced or sang on that show or even showed up as guest stars, like are people that I've either worked with on Broadway or like are friends of friends. And like, it's crazy to see how many faces I recognize in Maisel. I can't wait to get into it with you. If we broke down the theatricality of Maisel, would be like, boom, that's going to be a whole episode. But we'll talk about some of our favorite theater references at the end of the episode that Amy threw into the entirety of Gilmore Girls. Because obviously, if we broke all of that down, we'd be here till next year.
Yeah.
But
it isn't that far away, but it'll be very long.
It'll be very long. But to kind of round out Amy Sherman-Palladino and her like Broadway ties, she's currently, as I mentioned, Once Upon a Mattress is closed at this point that the episode is airing, but it's closing this weekend. And she adapted the book to Once Upon a Mattress and cast Sutton Foster, who, as we know, was in Bunheads. She was in the Gilmore Girls revival. She loves her some Sutton Foster. And the connection to Sutton Foster was from seeing Kelly Bishop in Anything Goes in the 2011 Broadway revival. I can't believe that is the lore there that she just saw.
And you're working on it.
And I am also working on Once Upon a Mattress. So that's very, very cool. And I hope that she continues to do more of those.
I know. There was where have I read this? I like see it in writing that she wanted to do a gypsy revival.
Yes. I don't know if it was a movie adaptation or that she was going to do the adaptation for the book for the stage, but they're about to open a gypsy revival with Audra McDonald. And I don't know if that is like kind of where the idea started.
She's tied to it.
She's not that I know of, but I don't know if that was the like early talks of the conversation of doing a gypsy revival. Cause this was in like 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, this was a long time ago.
It was quite a few years
I think
ago.
it was even before the revival that she was talking about this. Because like that, I think that's how sort of the musical element ended up in it, because maybe she was in that mindset. But I just remember that so clearly that like that had been in the works, in the talks. Because I even remember in my job like hearing that, like the stirrings of that occurring.
I just find that so fascinating because the last gypsy revival was in 2009 with Patti LuPone. 2009 with Patti LuPone. I saw it in early 2009. So it must have been 2008. And it's interesting.
That take years. Because that's like the thing that I learned from my job is like it is going to take 6 years to get something up on the stage in the way that you want it to be. Unless it's like ready to go, you know, unless there's a huge budget behind it. But a lot of the times it takes quite a while to get something into a theater on Broadway. So
that's
it could have just fallen apart pretty easily.
Yeah, which is no surprise, but I'm glad she got to adapt something like Once Upon a Mattress.
Yeah,
which
maybe that was switched to that.
Yeah, she made it really fun. I saw it when it was at Encores back in, I think, the beginning of the year, and I had a great time. And now I work on the show.
I remember you talking about it.
Yeah, it was really great. But speaking of Kelly Bishop, which is how Amy met Sutton Foster, who's now doing Once Upon a Mattress with her, we broke down Kelly Bishop's history and the ties that she has to theater and ballet, and subsequently, you know, Amy. In our 2-part breakdown of the third Gilmore Girls. So we're not going to recap
on
it.
Patreon. Yeah. But it's how she got her name Kelly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really cool component to it too. But yeah, we just did that. So if you want to hear it from her,
listen to the audiobook. It's so good.
So good.
But that also brings us to Lauren, who, grew up in theater and really, really aspired to be a Broadway baby. I mean, moved to New York, did the whole thing, went to, did summer stock. She really, really wanted to perform on Broadway and then really ended up flourishing in the television and film world. But I do think that her theatrical background probably also felt very appealing for someone like Amy. I do feel like given her performing background, she probably gravitates towards people who are of that live theater mindset, namely Kelly and Lauren, Ed, Liz Torres, Sally
People
Struthers.
who have her interests too.
Yeah, totally.
They vibe on that same wavelength.
And after Gilmore Girls, as many of you know, she ended up playing Miss Adelaide in Guys and Dolls, which is one of my favorite musicals. I have wanted to play Miss Adelaide since I was a kid. I love that show. And
did you see it?
I did not see it, but fun fact, it happened at the Nederlander Theater, which is where I did Pretty Woman from 2018 to 2019. It is my favorite show I've ever worked on in my life. I love everybody at the Nederlander so much. I got to go back there to do the Who's Tommy this past summer, which was such a treat for me because most people who work at the actual theater who are employed by the theater rather than the show, I was employed by the show. They're there for forever. And so to walk back in and kind of be home again was really cool. And to know that that was also Lauren's home for a short amount of time. The show was not open for very long.
Cool.
It's so
you feel like
cool.
You're walking amongst like the ghosts of everyone that was there previously.
Truly. And I have another tidbit about the Nederlander Theater, which I will share later. But I love that theater and I can't believe Lauren was also there. But I think part of the reason why I didn't see it is because I realized it was only open for a very short amount of time. And it was during my senior year of high school. And I think I had come to New York to see Next to Normal at that time, but I don't think my mom realized. I remember her telling me like, Lauren Graham is in Guys and Dolls. And I was like, oh, I'd love to see it. But I think it closed before we could even
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
You know?
That was before I was a theater kid, though. I actually wasn't a theater kid. I was a theater college student. I didn't get into theater until then. Yeah. So I didn't grow up with that at all.
Oh, I definitely did. I was like theater nerd.
I was
to
a
the
little
nines.
cheerleader girly and just missed it. Missed the train.
You got on the train eventually.
I had a stop later on. I didn't get on the early stops, but I got on there.
But you got on there by the caboose, you know?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I am at the caboose. Yeah, but then I walked to the front of the train. You know. I got there.
You got there. So before we get into the Townies, to kind of, keep it with the core Gilmore family, as many of you know, Edward Herrmann was also a stage actor. And he won a Tony Award alongside Kelly Bishop in 1976 for his performance in Mrs. Warren's Profession. Isn't that crazy? I just love that the two of them didn't even know each other. It was like, let's just stand next to each other and take a picture. And
well, that's what they do, is they always get all of the actors who win, actors and actresses who are up there. And I just love that picture exists. And they're like, oh yeah, we won a Tony in the same year.
Yeah.
Like she knew of him, of course, because like you can't not.
And I'm sure he knew of her. Like you can't not. But fun fact that ties him to another actor in Gilmore Girls. His Broadway debut was in 1972 in a show called Moon Children. And it was later revived by the Second Stage Theater in the 1980s, where Kathleen Wilholt, who plays Liz Danes, starred in 1987.
Oh,
is that not
so cool?
Crazy? And really the only stage credit she had besides another second stage production she did in the same year. So
yeah.
But also Ed, I didn't know this until like I rewatched the film maybe a few years ago, but he plays FDR in Annie. In the movie Annie.
Really?
Yes, that's him.
Oh my God.
He sings Tomorrow with Annie and Daddy Warbucks
in so long.
Is that not crazy? I loved that movie as a kid.
Yeah.
When I'm stuck with a day, that's great. Just him in his wheelchair.
Wait, I want to go back and
you gotta go back
that.
and watch. It's a very like thin, young-ish. I mean, he has like the salt and pepper hair. Edward Herrmann.
But pre-Richard, oh, what our dearest darling Edward Herrmann.
Love him. May he rest. So kind of getting into the Townies, someone who I'm going to mention who isn't necessarily a theater person, but just loves Broadway is Melissa McCarthy. I have heard about her in the last year going to like SUFs. She's been to SUFs like a bunch of times.
Has she?
Yeah, she loves it. She was there for opening night. She's been to Moulin Rouge a couple of times. My friend Sarah, who works there, I also worked in Moulin Rouge before the pandemic. She was like, Suki's here tonight. Sarah, you met Sarah when we went to,
yes.
She helped us with our photo shoot for our rebrand.
She's kind of like Suki.
She's
got Suki energy.
She's She's got big Suki energy. She is like my Suki. I love her so much. She was like, Suki's here. I was like, no. She brought her daughter. Like it was, and Ben was there. Ben Falcone, of course, who is her husband, who was also in an episode of Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
And she just loves Broadway so much. And I was watching an Instagram reel. She did an interview recently with Parade magazine, I believe, where she talked about how prior to getting her role on Gilmore Girls, she was kind of like, all right, I'm going to give this till my 30th birthday. And then, you know, we're going to see what happens. And right like weeks before her 30th birthday, she got cast in Gilmore Girls. But she was doing a lot of production leading up to that. And I wonder, she didn't really go into detail, at least from what I watched on this reel. But I wonder if that was not only like television production, but if it was also theater production. Because she's like a Groundlings kid, you know, she's into that like improv. She's an improv queen.
Of course. I have to imagine that she would just excel on the stage. Broadway stage.
I think that especially because Broadway is leaning towards, we've talked about this, like casting, you know, movie actors in.
That's the problem. It's like right now, like Broadway's having a hard time recovering from the pandemic, of course, and how people buy tickets and just like the habits of a theater goer.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're kind of having to like stunt cast.
It's so true.
Well-known people
Totally.
in order to get people in seats.
So true. So I could see her doing something and I hope she does. I think she'd be
100%.
great. I really think she'd be great.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned before, I think that like arguably the two most show businessy characters in Gilmore Girls are Liz Torres and played by Liz Torres and Sally Struthers, Babette and Miss Patty.
Of course.
Reverse it and you'll have the respective actresses. Yeah. But like they're the Broadway babies of this show. And like that is also really, really implemented into their characters on Gilmore Girls.
They are like, even though Babette is not like canonically has the same history as Patty does, the way that Sally like brings Babette to life is such a showgirl.
Oh
like
my
she
God.
is out there, she's outlandish, and like she really is like could be in any stage show. Like
so true.
But we've got Patty who has, you know, her and her, what is it that she says, her
bus and truck tour and her,
or no, her relationship is like the ish show. Like the business having an anniversary. Yeah. Like it's not a husband anniversary. It's her anniversary with the business we call show.
Yeah. And what's fascinating to me about Liz Torres specifically is that I had to go down a freaking rabbit hole to find any Broadway credits. And even now, what I'm about to tell you, I don't know if it's true because on her Wikipedia page, there is nothing about her and her theatrical productions, but it was really hard to find. So what I found, and I don't know if it's true, is that she was a Broadway replacement for Rita Moreno in a show called The Ritz, and she was also in a show called House of Blue Leaves. But I have found both of these shows on, you know how they have the Playbill vault and you can look at the playbills?
Yeah.
And Liz Torres' name is not listed in there. So I don't know how true it is, but I did see it on like a bunch of different media publications kind of recounting her life.
It could be one of those things that like, you know, it was an insert, you know, to the playbill and paper insert that week.
And maybe at that time they didn't like really keep track of replacements. Who's to say?
It's also hard to reprint an entire playbill just for someone's replacement.
That is so true.
Could be true.
Could be true. But yeah, she was also in the off-Broadway production of a musical called It Must Be Him. And there is a guy who was in this with her. His name is Patrick Richmond. And Patrick Richmond played Mr. Robitussin in The Princess Diaries.
Really?
Yes. And he was also the butler Julio in Pretty Woman. So like lots of ties to Gary Marshall, who Marion Ross, who plays Trix, was very deeply connected to. But I love him because when we did Pretty Woman at the Nederlander Theater, where Lauren Graham did Guys and Dolls, he came to our opening preview and he is just the absolute, like the most lovely man, just an absolute sweetheart. And we have a picture together and I was talking to Brett about him recently. I don't know why. And he was like, oh, I did First Wives Club with him out in Chicago.
Oh, really?
I was like, what?
And that's so the thing is like, that's the thing about Broadway people is like, you know, everyone, regardless of how like much their star has risen. Everyone is like, oh yeah, I did this show with that person when they did this.
Isn't that crazy?
Like there's so many people that like you are we probably have so many people that we're 6 degrees of separation
That's
from.
why I was thinking of doing a 6 degrees of separation from the Gilmore Girls because I was like, we could take any show that we did and probably do a 6 degrees of separation. 100%.
Yeah.
But speaking of people that Brett has worked with, we were watching So Good Talk the other day. And that's the episode where Luke is like really pooty and he's like making bad burgers and he's throwing people out of the diner. Remember that one guy who he throws out of the diner after Lane tells him like, hey, you should wait until
And he throws him on his knees.
Literally on his knees. Brett goes, that's Jerry. I was like, who's Jerry?
Who's Jerry?
He goes, I worked with him. We did West Side Story together. Remember when Brett went to Italy last year and did West Side Story? Yeah. He texted Jerry and was like, hey, Jerry.
Just like
I just saw you on Gilmore Girls.
That's so crazy.
He played Officer Krupke.
Small world.
And Officer Krupke.
Also, West Side Story.
Kelly Bishop. So many references. And Kelly Bishop. And Officer Krupke is a reference in the pilot of Gilmore Girls. Look, Officer Krupke, she's right over there.
Wow.
Isn't that
crazy? We like to make on Patreon a list of Amy Sherman-Palladino's favorite things, and one of them is West Side Story.
West Side Story is fully in there.
Yeah.
West Side Story
along with
Fiddler on the Roof. Correct.
Which was one of the shows, the revival my office produced.
Oh my God. See, the 6 degrees of separation are coming out already.
It's all there.
So moving on to Sally Struthers. Oh, actually, I wanted to mention to you, it said that Liz Torres was a producer. She was listed as a producer on the Broadway musical Ghost in 2012. I loved that musical. Great show. Saw it. It was very good. So moving on to Sally Struthers. She performed on Broadway 3 times. Her debut was in a show called Wally's Cafe. And then she starred in The Odd Couple with Rita Moreno, who Liz allegedly replaced in a show.
Yeah.
Now, what I found fascinating is that allegedly there was some negative energy from Rita Moreno towards Sally Struthers. And then Rita ended up leaving the show and was replaced with someone else who Sally got along with a lot better. And I was like, tea, just a little bit of tea.
Just a little splash of tea.
And Sally was a replacement in the 1994 Broadway revival of Grease, which was my favorite. Like baby Tara, high school Tara used to blast this specific soundtrack in her room when she was in high school because the 1994 production of Grease is different. It's like some of the orchestrations are different. They rearranged some of the songs differently. Rosie O'Donnell, Brooke Shields, like a bunch of like this was one of the first Broadway productions that cast like Hollywood stars in it that kind of ignited this like, oh, we could do this, where we put in this revolving door of like Hollywood actors. And so Sally Struthers was in that. But Haley and I were in Algonquin last year. And when we were there, we were.
I thought you were about to say we were in a show together. I was like,
we were in a show together.
Where's this going?
We were like, okay.
It's the show. But yeah, we were in Algonquin last year.
And Sally Struthers was in Tootsie. The Algonquin Theater loves Sally Struthers. They love her. She's been in a ton of stuff up there from what I've heard.
And I think that's kind of what she's done. I haven't seen a ton of her not stage is the wrong word. I haven't seen a ton of her in film and TV recently, but I have heard nothing but her doing stuff on the stage.
Isn't that crazy?
I love that for her.
I do too.
And I see so much of that of Patty and Babette in the show because Patty has nothing but show references to offer up.
Nothing but
what she, like that's the whole backstory of her character. I do like that she was on a what is it, bus and truck tour of Guys and Dolls, and that is what Lauren Graham went off to do.
That is what Lauren Graham went off. I know, it's very fun. I feel like a lot of Liz Torres's theatrical credits might be missing from her history because I think a lot of what she did was maybe bus and truck tours like early on, or things that are more regionally based. But she's a Broadway baby at heart.
I know. I'd be interested to know how much of her personal life made it into Patty.
Me too.
But very interesting.
So keeping up with the Townies theme, Michael Winters, who was born in Hartford, Connecticut, by the way, he's a local. I had no idea that Michael Winters, who plays Taylor Dosey, he was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He performed on Broadway in a 6-week run of a show called Wrong Mountain before his TV career really took off. And I read the playbill, like, how they have their little biographies. So this was at the end of 1999 into 2000. It ran for a very short period of time, but His little bio was so cute because it was before he, like, any of his TV career blossomed. And he's like, his history is in Shakespeare acting, which is not surprising to me at all.
Yeah,
like,
I did know
can
that.
see that for him so clearly. And it's just so sweet because, like, I am like, oh, little Michael Winters, this is before you're about to become Taylor Dosey. Like, literally right before. This was in, like, end of 99 into 2000. He was about to be cast in the show, which is so exciting.
Yeah, there is one role in particular. I can't remember what it is. It's a Shakespeare role that he's done multiple times.
Really?
I can't remember what it is. I know it's terrible of me to even mention it because I can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
But I just remember learning that he has like a strong past in Shakespeare and his like theater history mostly revolves around that, which I just love for him.
I do too.
Like, I feel like that bringing that sort of energy to the show that alongside so many other people that is the history that they have and the background in their performance, it's like so clear that they can be an ensemble.
Totally.
Like, that's what Kelly talked about in her memoirs, that there was no ego that stood out as like, I'm the star of the show.
Completely.
Everyone walked in and we were like, we are an ensemble. We are going to go to Denny's after the performance of this. We're going to go to a Chili's at 10 p.m. and wreak havoc.
Did you see that meme that
this.
was like, if Cynthia and Ariana didn't go to Denny's after the premiere of Wicked, it's not real.
Yeah,
and I was like,
real
that's so
kids.
true. Because if you're a theater kid, you know, you always go to a diner or you go to Denny's.
You went to the diner.
Oh, we always went to the diner afterwards.
Chili's,
full face of makeup, just beaming.
Street clothes.
Yeah, acting like you had just performed on Broadway. For real.
And I feel like Taylor bringing that to, or Michael Winters bringing that to Taylor to the town meetings, it just makes so much sense.
Totally.
And the theatricality of a Friday night dinner, that like there's like these subtleties that are so grand that they have to do in theater, but I feel like all of them transitioned really well to, you know, face acting that doesn't quite exist in theater as well, like unless it's like giant for the whole stage to see acting to the back of the house. That
so true.
I feel like despite all of their beginnings on the stage, they all transition to the subtleties of TV quite well.
Really well. But someone who we've talked about a lot in kind of like her big theatrics on Patreon especially is Keiko playing Lane Kim.
Yeah.
And it didn't surprise me that she was in
Atlanta recently.
She was just in Atlanta. She did.
I didn't get a chance to go see her.
I know. I was going to ask because she just did a show called The Chinese Lady at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta.
At the Alliance Theater, yeah.
Have you seen other shows there?
We produce a show there, and so I was able to come down to Atlanta and see the opening night of a show. But very funny side note, talking about how small the world is. I was at a friend's wedding, and we were just like all dancing on the dance floor, and I see this guy's face, and I'm like, how do I know you? Like, I've never met this man before. I was like, why do I know you? You look so familiar.
Yeah.
And we started going through all of our friends and going through things, and he goes, well, I act. And I was like, oh, what have you been in? And he said like the name of the show that I had worked on. And the reason I recognized him is because I had his headshot on my desk.
Yes. I remember you telling me this story. Yeah.
And I just was like, the smallest world in the whole,
literally
the whole smallest. Yeah. The world is small. It's
the world is
so
small.
But I wanted to go see Keiko at the Alliance, and I didn't have any time to go.
I know. It's a bummer. But she did recently do that. And what I also really love, speaking of Shakespeare acting, Emily Kuroda, who plays Mrs. Kim, is another actress who's done several Shakespearean productions. Yeah. She's also a veteran of the East West Players, which is LA's premier Asian American theater group, which I found really cool. And she and Keiko did a play together in 2010 called No No Boy in Santa Monica.
No, but I would have loved to have seen them together. They have such good chemistry.
They really do.
Like as scene partners.
So true.
That there's just something about the two of them that I would have loved to have seen them.
Me too. On the topic of women who are just really good scene partners, Rose Abdu is an improv queen. So she's never performed on Broadway, but she studied at Second City in Chicago, which is like very impressive, and went on to build her own one-woman shows before she started doing more television and screen acting, which I would have loved to see.
Really?
She's like an amazing improver. So I just love that that kind of lends itself
who
to
plays Gypsy.
Yes, who plays Gypsy. I'm sorry. I have to say people's
feel
names.
we know, but sometimes that's like the worst part of our show is that we're talking about something that like
someone is like Googling it in their car while they're driving.
Yeah, like the episode names. Like I feel like that's like kind of like the worst part of our show. If we could review our own show, it's that sometimes we we act a little bit like everyone knows what we're talking about.
It's just the two of us.
It's just the two of us. No, but a lot of people do know that.
Yeah.
Her name is Rose.
But I think that also
we
really, really speaks to the role of Berta, right? Is who she plays in. That's the name of the mate she plays in A Year in the Life.
The revival, yes.
Yeah. So I think that speaks to her capabilities as just kind of this like very multifaceted, versatile actor, much like Alex Borstein, who I was surprised has not performed on Broadway, but feels like
I was actually going to mention that too as an aspect of the show of like, it feels very stage performance to have one actor play multiple parts and come back as if they're a different person entirely, because we have Alex Borstein doing that.
Totally.
We also have Marion Ross. Is that her name? I always
Marion
forget
Ross.
it. Wow. I got it on the first try because she plays
Trix
and
Marilyn.
I wanted to call her Marion, but it is Marilyn. And Alex plays Drella and Miss Celine. And is that it?
Drella, Miss Celine, and I think she plays one other character. And
the voicemail.
She does the voicemail for Dwight. And
yes.
I want my board games back. No. Yeah.
I think it's board games because he has a huge cabinet of board games. But
especially the Trivia Pursuit. Yes, that's her.
Yeah. And
so funny.
I just think that element of like having these characters come in and play multiple parts, very theatrical.
Very, very theatrical. So Michael Gundolfy, who plays Andrew, he never performed on Broadway, but this is one of the funniest things that I found in his Wikipedia page. He's pretty much exclusively a screen actor, but he did do a production of Guys and Dolls when he was in the 10th grade, and he played Nathan Detroit. The guy who played Nicely Nicely Johnson in that high school production that Andrew Mike was in, played Nicely Nicely Johnson, was the choreographer, and that is Casey Nicola, who is like Tony Award winning Broadway choreographer Casey Nicola.
That's so random.
Insane. I love that was on his Wikipedia page. In the 10th grade, he played Nathan Detroit alongside Casey Nicola, Broadway Tony nominated renowned choreographer.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
Okay. That's giving kind of, I mean, not on the same degree, but it's like John Krasinski and BJ Novak going to high school together.
I know. Crazy. So for real.
I love that.
Brian Tarantina, who, as all of you know, is my love Bootsy. He was in a bunch of off-Broadway and Broadway productions. Yes, from 1980 to 1995 before stepping into the television and film world. And one of the shows he did was with Matthew Broderick and Alan Ruck, who were both in Ferris Bueller's Day Off together. Isn't that crazy? Next up on the Townie list, Michael DeLuise, who was never on Broadway, but he plays TJ, and he is Dom DeLuise's son. Dom DeLuise, huge. If you don't know who Dom DeLuise is, Google him. I mean, he was huge in the television and film world, but also
this isn't a Dom DeLuise podcast.
It is not, but like in the Broadway circuit. So like, I feel like I would be remiss to not mention that because that's like, so I think that's so cool. Like what an iconic family to be a part of, you know?
I know. And his brother was dad on Wizard of Waverly Place.
And he was also in Gilmore Girls.
Oh yeah. He was in the bachelor party scene.
Yeah. And the wedding.
Of course.
Yeah.
He was part of it. He was his brother.
Mm-hmm. And last but not least
Yeah. I was just making sure it wasn't like a friend or a cousin or something.
No, it was his brother. His brother played his brother.
His brother played his brother.
Now, I have to say, speaking of that episode, I really wanted the Second Town Troubadour to be like some wacky theater guy. Couldn't find anything. I really was like, this man has to be. He has to be some sort of Shakespearean
Broadway baby.
Renaissance Broadway baby, but I couldn't find anything. I know.
Would have loved.
But to round out the townie world of Gilmore Girls, Carole King. Carole freaking King.
Carole fucking King.
Who is not only an icon, but one of my favorite Broadway musicals, one of my favorite jukebox musicals is Beautiful, the Carole King musical.
Yes.
It's
a jukebox musical is when they take the catalog of an artist and put it to a story of a musical.
And it was the story of her life.
Mia.
Yeah, like Mamma Mia, like Ain't Too Proud, which was the Temptations musical, Jersey Boys. Yeah. And they did one about Carole King. Which was beautiful. Beautiful, the Carole King musical. And it was
beautiful.
It was so good. Jessie Mueller, who plays her, and you know, several actresses went on to succeed her because the show ran for 5 years.
So good.
It's just
I saw Jessie Mueller in it.
You did. I saw Chelena Kennedy. My family had gone to see Jessie Mueller like a couple weeks before I went, and she had just left. They went like her final week. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Jessie Mueller is going to come back
too.
around because moving into the Chilton world, Dakin Matthews, who plays Headmaster Charleston, is, I mean, I could go on and on about this man's credits, but we'd be here for forever.
I know.
He has such an extensive theatrical career. Like he, I think, either went to or taught at, maybe both, Juilliard. Like I could read his Wikipedia page to you right now as like a love letter to his entire theatrical career, but he was most recently seen in Waitress with Jessie Mueller, who starred as Carole King in Beautiful the Musical on Broadway.
You know, I think I saw him because I went and saw it shortly after it opened.
Yeah.
When my dad went. And it was such a good time. And I saw Jessie and I just like wasn't even thinking about like, hey, Headmaster Charleston isn't
Headmaster Charleston's on stage.
Playbill and see, because I saw that one several times.
I saw it. I've never seen a show. Gavin Creel. I've never seen a show more times than I've seen Waitress.
I saw that one. I love Waitress. It's one of my favorite musicals.
Same.
But,
Wicked and Waitress are the two I've seen the most.
Yeah. The W's. But yeah, I actually don't know if I saw him. I'm pretty sure I did.
If you saw Jessie, I have to imagine you did. I saw him. He was so good, and he sings that song, Take It From an Old Man. It's just so cute.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, because I have a couple of pals who were in Waitress, he's just the nicest man.
That just makes so much sense.
Oh, it makes my heart so happy. So yeah, I could go on and on and on about Dakin, but we'd be here for 100 years.
True
Because
Broadway baby.
True Broadway baby. True like master of the stage. Of course, like a ton of Shakespearean productions. Of course, like no doubt.
Yeah. A legend behind that Chilton desk.
Yes. But speaking of Chilton, one of the most, I'd say, well-known theatrical references in the Gilmore Girls world is Brad Langford being in Into the Woods. Adam Wiley, who plays Brad Langford, did play Jack in the 2002 revival of Into the Woods, and Amy wrote it into the show in season 3 when he returns. And, you know, not to bury the lead, but speaking of my favorite theatrical moments in Gilmore Girls, the references, I just love Paris Geller being like, she says something like, do you need a 5, 6, 7, 8? Like she keeps like roasting him.
She
being like,
nails him with it. Yeah.
I got the beans of grandma's house, the magic beans of grandma's house. I just love how she makes fun of him. I'm winningly naive. He is so funny. And he tells a lot of his stories and like the history of his career, both on screen and on stage, on his TikTok and his Instagram. So definitely give it a follow. He recently was talking about how he played Bach in the San Francisco production of Wicked. And I believe he may have auditioned for the workshop or the original Broadway cast, but then ended up being cast in the San Francisco production, which is, I think, stayed there for quite some time because Wicked is Wicked.
You know, when you said Bach, it like kind of, I've been very avoidant of Wicked, like anything having to do with it, because I just don't want to see anything. Because I know some things have changed and they've added some little parts, lines cut and stuff. You said Bach, and I like immediately wanted to start crying because I want to go see that so bad.
I can't wait to see it. I've heard it is perfect. Gerardo said it was perfect.
Fantastic.
Caroline said it was perfect. I just, everybody, Eli Rallo, huge Wicked fan, is like, it's perfect. I have no notes.
And I've heard from people who aren't even theater people, because I know a lot of you listening right now are probably not theater people. Like this is not your vibe.
I feel like the Venn diagram of Gilmore Girls fans and theater people could be similar to the Venn diagram of Gilmore Girls fans and Taylor Swift fans.
But I feel like the Venn diagram of that is probably different too. It's like we're hitting different sectors of people. Like maybe you don't even know that you like Broadway yet, or maybe this is just not for you. But I have heard from so many people who are not musical people that this was just out of this world.
Yeah.
I've also heard from a lot of people that like little tiny lines that were cut that people love have like kind of disappointed them, but overall good, positive.
I have heard
you said Bach and I was like, don't say
anything more about Bach. I won't, I promise. But rounding out the Chilton crew, Emily Burgle, who plays Francie, is also a stage actress. And I think I've told this story on here that I met her in 2014 at the
You
first.
definitely talked about it on Patreon.
Yeah, the first opening night party I ever had was for Heather's. It was my first costuming job, and she was there. And I went up to her and I was like, "Hey!" And she was standing with I think the writer of Heather's. Like she was standing there with the guy who wrote the original screenplay, and I did not give a shit about him. I just wanted to talk to her. And she was like, "Hi," until she found out that I did costumes, and then they were like, "Oh, okay, all right.
Oh, you're not a stranger.
You're
No
not a
danger.
stranger. There
But
is
also
no
a little
danger.
bit.
A little bit.
Little
I am a
danger.
stranger." But I was like, "I loved you on Gilmore Girls and Desperate Housewives," and she was like, "Oh, thanks.
Oh, cool.
What do you do?" And I was like, "Costumes." She was like, "Oh, cool, awesome."
What do you
And
do?
then like
I talk
asked
about you
me-
for a living.
Now I talk about you for a living. But what I thought was really cool about Emily is that she got her start doing a production of Romeo and Juliet at the Old Globe Theater in 1998 opposite Neil Patrick Harris.
No way.
Imagine Neil Patrick Harris is your Romeo. Like, what?
You know, admittedly, maybe I just don't have as much of a expansive mind. I don't see him as a Romeo.
This was, I think, around the time he was, or maybe it was, no, this was not around the same time. I was going to say, was this around the time he was playing Doogie Howser? Doogie Howser was the 80s.
Dude, I don't know. You're better with yours.
Yeah, you're right. Doogie Howser, which is a reference in Gilmore Girls. That was 1989. So I don't know. Maybe?
I don't know. I just, there's something about him that, I don't know. Maybe
Doesn't
it's more
scream.
recent.
Yeah.
I only know him more.
Well, you know him as
How I
like,
Met Your Mother.
yeah, Barney, I was going to say.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But I thought that was really sweet. She also just did a production called Goodnight Oscar opposite Sean Hayes on Broadway. That closed,
really?
I think, earlier this year or last year. Yeah. And Sean
that's
Hayes,
so
for those of you
cool.
who aren't familiar with his real name, he played Jack on Will and Grace, most notably. I saw him in Damn Yankees. He played the devil, Mr. Applegate. And he's a professionally trained classical piano player. And so he
really?
Yes. Oh my God, he's unbelievable. And I believe that that is what he did here in Goodnight Oscar.
Yeah, he does a lot on Broadway.
He is so talented.
He's become a bit of a Broadway baby himself.
He is totally a Broadway baby. And he and Eric McCormick, who played Will in Will and Grace, I believe they have a podcast, or at least they did, while they were doing Goodnight Oscar last year. He was doing double duty, like doing the podcast and doing this, starring in this Broadway show alongside Emily Bergel.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
Look at him go.
One of the things that I completely forgot about until we were watching Jews and Chinese Food the other night, Brett and me, is Brett was asking about this actor, being like, I recognize him. I know him from somewhere else. And that is Wayne Wilcox, who plays Marty. And I was like, oh,
Who about this man?
I don't
What are
know.
you going to tell me?
He plays Gordon in Rent, the movie, which I completely forgot about.
Oh my God.
Do you remember that? When they're all sitting in
No.
the circle? You know Rent, the movie.
Yes.
You
I
know Rent. Okay.
Yeah.
So
where they had to pay their rent, but they weren't going to.
right. But it also deals with the AIDS crisis that was going on at the time in the mid 90s. And this movie came out in 2005. So this was around the time he was doing Gilmore Girls. And they're in a circle and they sing.
I don't think I've ever seen the Rent movie. I think I've only ever seen the version of Rent that, like the filmed version of the stage.
Oh my God. Well,
Like I've never seen the movie of
what
it.
I was going to say about the filmed version of the stage production is that was at the Nederlander Theater, where I did Pretty Woman, where Lauren Graham did Guys and Dolls.
I've seen that for
Okay.
some reason, but I have not seen the movie.
You should watch. You should watch the movie. It's unbelievable. That was my exposure to Rent.
I've seen like clips of it, but I've never seen it in its entirety.
Well, there is this scene where they're at a support group for people who have AIDS. And there's this character named Gordon who sings a part of the, there's a song, and there's only us, there's only this. He starts it. And he has an amazing voice. He's a really, really great vocalist. And also he's done a ton of stage acting. Like, he's so talented.
I didn't know that.
I know. He did The Light in the Piazza
guy.
opposite Celia Keenan Bolger.
No,
Yes.
really?
He didn't do it on Broadway, but he did it. I wonder if he did a pre-Broadway production. I don't remember what theater he did it at, but the fact that he did it opposite her is huge.
Yeah. I feel like we're getting into the shocking part of this because
I know.
he would have been doing that around the same time he would have been doing Marty. Is that why like we
Exactly.
have a Marty gap?
Maybe that's why we
Was
have a
after
Marty gap.
Rent?
Was after Rent.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe that's the answer, is that he was in New York filming Rent. To be fair, he's only in one scene. So I don't think he's necessarily like,
He's not like, he didn't like do Rent.
I remember him doing the, look, I find some of what you teach suspect. Oh, he has such a beautiful voice. Oh my God.
I didn't know that about
I'll
this
send you a
man.
link. Yeah, it's
like
so
Rory.
good.
I like you, Rory.
Oh my God, Brett and
I like Logan.
died over that.
What do you think about that?
I paused it. He didn't catch it because I was waiting for him to react to it when she did it. And after the scene went, I paused it and I said, listen, we need to go back and watch this again because I need you to understand the lore of how much Haley and I make fun of this. And I said, imagine you say to a girl, I like you. And she goes, I like Logan. He just burst out laughing.
I like the man that you literally despise that we just went to dinner with.
He then picked up on it and thought it was absolutely unhinged.
I just like can't imagine being like so bold, so courageous as to say, I like you. Well, I don't like you. I like someone else.
I told him, and I stand
heartless.
by this after watching it the other day. I said this on Patreon. I really think that there was a cut somewhere. It cuts too fast and they don't keep the camera on him when he says, I like you. I like Logan. There was a cut there and I am determined to find out. I am determined because
we'll have to get Amy herself.
The
to watch
flow
the
of it
scene.
doesn't make sense to me. It
I'll have to
doesn't
find
make
the
sense
original
to me.
script.
All right.
If any of you have the original
we
script,
should reach out to Stan and ask him. This is season 5 episode. Do you have the original script? Do you have the cuts? I wonder. Anyway, so that is Marty. We got far away.
Yeah. We lost the plot for a second for Marty, but Marty also lost the plot a little bit too.
He's done shows in New York and like stage
What's
plays
his
in
name
New York.
again?
Wayne Wilcox.
You know what? That's one of those names that like I know most of the actors' names. I did not know his name. Anytime I've seen him, I'm like, well, there's Marty.
There's Marty. I know.
There goes Marty.
Yeah,
I haven't seen him in much, admittedly, but wow, I'm gonna have to go back and first of all, watch Rent in full.
You should watch Rent. It's so good. That was I vividly remember sitting in the movie theater watching that with my friend Christiana. Came out in 2005. And we went and saw it. It was really cool.
I didn't watch a lot of musicals growing up.
That's true. When it came out, you weren't.
Hairspray.
Oh God, Hairspray was so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Zac Efron.
Oh, I had that poster on my wall.
Everyone had that Zac Efron moment. So
it's true.
Anyway, back to Gilmore Girls.
Greg Henry, who plays Mitchum Huntsberger.
Greg, I love him.
I know, he's great. He's done a lot of other television and film acting. Scandal. I loved him in Scandal. He was so funny. But he played the title character, Julius Caesar, in Julius Caesar at Shakespeare in the Park in 2017.
Did he really?
He did.
Wait, I think I saw that.
When were you working at the Public? Weren't you doing work with the Public, who does Shakespeare in the Park?
I think it was 2017.
That's so crazy. Yeah, he played Julius Caesar.
No, I think I saw that.
That's crazy.
Whoa.
You didn't recognize him? I'm Mitchum
No, I
Huntsberger.
might
Who
have.
are you? I'm Julius Caesar. Who are you?
You know, I like have a really terrible memory when it comes to things like that. I like remember I went to go see a show. Do I remember anything that happened in it? No. But I'm sure I'm like, oh, look, it's Logan's dad.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, because I saw like everything that was Shakespeare.
That's
in the
what I
Park
was
from,
wondering.
like, 2017 until like 2019, I guess. So,
Totally.
like 3 summers of Shakespeare in the Park.
That's crazy.
Because I got free tickets to it.
Well, of course. And speaking of Shakespeare, Michael York, who played Asher Fleming, was predictably a very well-known Shakespearean actor in the 60s. I mean, that is written all over everything.
It's also mentioned
does.
in Kelly's book that
Yes.
like one of the people that Amy was able to get for this was him.
Yeah. No, he was definitely on that list. But he also played Brian Roberts in the Cabaret film with Liza Minnelli. He was like the lead in that. And I have not seen that movie in so long that I kind of forgot about it. But he did several.
No, that's really
Yeah.
obvious though.
No,
If you
100%.
like see the way he plays his character.
He is so
you're
theatrical.
Like, this man is from a stage.
Totally. He did several off-Broadway and off-Broadway region, like very prominent regional theaters. He's also from the UK, so I'm sure he did West End and a ton of really renowned theaters out there as well. He's still alive. He is a very, very talented actor. And
It's hard to like distinguish sometimes between the character and the actor because you're
know.
like talking about what he did, and Asher did famously die.
Asher did famously die on the show, but
Michael
he's still
is
alive.
still alive
and well.
working.
And then last of the Yaleys is George Anthony Bell, who of course was the speech coach, the dialogue coach on Gilmore Girls, but he also but he also played Professor Bell in the show. And if you grew up in the 90s, you know him as the principal in Even Stevens.
Yes. Oh my God. That's like my favorite. The lore of George Bell is so fascinating because not only was he the dialect coach and is the reason why everyone can talk as fast as they can because of him, but he also is a character in the show. He's also in Even Stevens. This is not Broadway related at all.
It is not. But speaking of Broadway, he was in a few Broadway productions and he did a lot of stage work. This was mostly in the 70s and 80s, but he was in a Broadway production called Timbuktu in 1978. And he also played Old Deuteronomy in the National Tour of Cats.
Did he?
Yes.
That is like, it's crazy how many of these people, and it's not crazy because a lot of people, they will either start in film. It's not working for them. They go to theater. People start in theater. It's not what they want it to be. They want to try film.
Or they just want to do both.
Makes a lot of sense.
They have their, you know, they have like one foot in, one foot out. Straddling the line. Yeah. So
and
common.
sometimes you want to do one of them. You're successful in the other. And because of that, you're able to go do the other with the success of the other. Like I'm talking about them like they're coasts, like East Coast, West Coast, because that's really like the hub of them.
It is kind of true. But yeah, there are two more here that I'll talk about very briefly. This is where I could have like really taken a deep dive into some of the bit characters who were on the show for a very short period of time. But Marion Ross, as we mentioned before, who plays Trix, and Marilyn, she is like an icon. I mean, she was in Happy Days and like, you know, that's
what my dad immediately recognized her from.
Yeah, she was in Happy Days. I mean, she has done so much, and her I think her television career, I think that happening, taking off for her kind of like deterred her from doing theater, or didn't necessarily allow her the space to do theater, because she did change her name from Marion with an A at the end to Marion with an O at the end, because she thought it would look better on like on a marquee. And so I think that her goal was to be a stage actor.
And you mean at the end, like it's after, before that. And
Marianne, Marian, I think is how she was born. But she changed the last A to an O because she thought that it would look better on the on the marquee. And so the thing is that I think she really set out to do stage and then ended up falling into some television and film work instead. But she did perform on Broadway and only once on the West End. I didn't really get a gauge on what her Broadway work was. It was mentioned very briefly. It was similar to Liz Torres in that I was like, I don't know if this was as focused on because of her extensive, you know, television and film career.
Yes.
And that happened for a lot of people who were in Gilmore Girls. You know, if they didn't have like notable Broadway credits, it kind of got buried because their screen career was just so vast. But someone who kind of toes both lines is Jane Carr, who plays Nora. She's one of Emily's friends at the DAR. She's always drunk.
Oh, Nora with the red hair.
With the red hair, yes.
I love Nora.
She's a theater icon, and she's done a lot of stuff on the West End. She was also in the Broadway production. It was not a revival. The 2009 production of Mary Poppins on Broadway, which I never saw, and I wanted to see so badly. And she was in it.
I love this character.
I know,
but she's again one of those people that you meet them because she is prominently featured in Rory's DAR stint in season 6. Like she's one of those characters that kind of pops in and out. But you can tell. It's just like she has that quality to her that just it's reeking of stage.
Totally.
And she's a star sitting there amongst these other women.
Yes, 100%. So that kind of rounds out the original series. But as many of you know, in A Year in the Life, there were a lot of Broadway babies who made their appearance in the Gilmore Girls world. And
it makes sense.
It makes sense. I mean, I think also at that point, you know, Amy was even further into like starting to walk towards the theatrical scene, as we mentioned. You know, she was about to potentially adapt Gypsy for the stage. She was walking towards the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So, at that point, she had also done Bunheads with Sutton Foster. So she featured her in the musical alongside Christian Borle, who was her ex-husband. I don't know if we've talked about that here on air, but Sutton Foster.
I think we did in the revival
revival episode. Yes. So they were married and got divorced, and they were able to, they're from what I understand, or from what I've heard, read, etc., they're still friends. They
enough to do Gilmore Girls together,
clearly. But that I remember watching that for the first time and being like, oh my God, they got Sutton Foster and Christian Borle to do this together.
And I think that was the era of Something Rotten on Broadway.
It was the era of Something Rotten on Broadway.
And so Christian Borle was like forefront of everyone's minds,
yeah.
like all over billboards, etc.
Yeah.
And so seeing him there, I'm like, oh,
I know. And, despite how we feel about the musical, they're so talented. Like, just two very prominent Broadway actors, at least in today's modern, age
Broadway landscape.
of, Sutton Foster. Fun fact about Sutton Foster, and I don't know if I shared this when we talked about her in A Year in the Life, and we'll talk about her more as we dive into Bunheads and and I don't think she's in Maisel, but we'll talk also about her in A Year in the Life. But Sutton Foster got her start. She, I think she was the girl who sings NYC. Just got here this morning. 3 bucks, 2 bags, 1 me.
I love that.
I know. She, I think, did it on the national tour. I don't know if she did it on Broadway, but she was like the New York City girl, NYC girl, if you will. And she was cast in a production of Thoroughly Modern Millie that was going out to California to do its out-of-town run, and she was cast in the ensemble. And the original production of Thoroughly Modern Millie, I believe Kristen Chenoweth was playing Millie. And something happened. She ended up not doing it, which actually I think kind of worked out for her, because then she went on to do Wicked. I don't know if that's the reason.
A little known play.
A little production you might have heard of called Wicked. And that was in 2003. Millie, I believe, was in 2001, 2002. So this must have been in the year 2000, 2001 that they were out in California. Kristen Chenoweth's best friend, Erin Dilley, ended up taking over the role of Millie. She was slated to do it. Something happened. Erin Dilley is such a love. She was my acting and vocal coach for a while. I dressed her on a production called Songbird back in 2015. She's just an absolute dreamboat, so massively talented. But something happened out in California, and I don't really know the full story, but Sutton Foster was understudying the role and had to go on for Erin for some reason. And in going on, she became who she is, because
they were like, oh, wow,
that's Millie. And so
this went from being this is Sutton to this is Sutton Foster.
This is Sutton Foster. And so she ended up playing the role, taking over the role, and that ended up putting her on the map, and she is Sutton Foster.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Forever.
That's cool.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And I think that that's like an interesting thing that like a lot of people might not know about the musical, is that they cast like huge Broadway stars into this little tiny 10-minute version of the show, which of course I feel like she would have wanted to bring Sutton from Bunheads into the revival.
Course.
But yeah, there's just this element of it, because not only are they the two Broadway stars, there's also a little like a throwaway character that feels like she's going somewhere, and then we do throw her away. And that is Emily and Lorelai's therapist,
Carrie Butler. I was a massive Carrie Butler fan growing up. Like when I heard the Hairspray album for the first time, because she played Penny Pinkleton in the Broadway production of Hairspray in 2002. She is unbelievable, and her voice is just freaking wild. But I admired her so much, and I wanted to be Carrie Butler. Like I just thought she was unbelievable. Brett really admired her in Bat Boy the musical. She was in that. She's done a whole slew of things, but she was in Beetlejuice, which Haley's office worked on. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome. And so we kind of got a little bit of her singing when they're doing the auditions. You kind of hear her a little bit before Sutton really steps in, which I found so interesting. And I had heard she was a huge Gilmore Girls fan. And so to be able to be a part of this, so to be able to be a part of this production was really special to her. And I'd love to have her on the podcast to talk about that.
Yeah, that would be cool. I didn't realize that she was such a big Gilmore Girls fan. I think the only thing about her is that like we cast this incredible Broadway actress as a therapist who then just kind of went a little kooky and tried to be a part of the town musical. And I was like, wait, we were really getting somewhere with the girlies.
Totally.
Why is she crazy?
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe your therapist wants to be in a musical. That doesn't mean they're not a qualified therapist, but we were really going somewhere.
We were really going somewhere.
We were making some progress.
We were. But speaking of Carrie Butler, one of the things that I absolutely loved her in, one of the shows that, I mean, when I was really like in my theater kid high was when I was in high school. And so in 2007, there was a production of Xanadu. It was a musical version of the movie Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John, and Carrie Butler played the Olivia Newton-John character. And I absolutely loved that musical, listened to it on repeat. And one of the people who was in that show with her is a woman named Jackie Hoffman. And she actually plays Esther in A Year in the Life, which is one of the two newspaper people at the Stars Hollow Gazette that Rory works with when she comes in. She's the one with the glasses. She's so silly. But to tie her to Carrie Butler even further, Carrie Butler played Penny Pinkleton in Hairspray. Jackie Hoffman played her mother, Prudy Pinkleton, in Hairspray on Broadway at the Neil Simon Theater, where I did Cats. So where they did Hairspray and where I saw Carrie Butler perform for the first time, and where I guess I probably saw Jackie Hoffman, that was the first Broadway house that I ever worked in doing Cats.
I love it. Theater. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
And, you know, as we're talking, I just realized like the revival really is just so Broadway coded.
Oh my God.
Not only in like the people that are there, but like I'm remembering the joke that everyone would always say that the character that Sutton Foster played was Kinky Boots in Kinky Boots. She played Kinky Boots. And they're like, that's not one of the characters. She was Kinky Boots. And I can only hear it in Sally Struthers' voice.
Oh my God, so good. It's so
there's
so good.
No character of Kinky Boots.
Obviously, of course. The last thing I want to say about Jackie Hoffman before we wrap this up is that she did an off-Broadway production of Once Upon a Mattress, and she played Princess Winifred, who Sutton Foster is currently playing on Broadway from the
That's so
adaptation
random
by Amy Sherman-Palladino.
Whoa.
She was Kinky Boots. She was the mattress.
You know, I have to wonder if Amy knew that, and like she was connecting Jackie Hoffman to this other thing she was doing, and like connecting with her over it of this show she had been in.
I wonder
Sutton was going to be in it.
You know what's so also interesting is that in the last season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which we'll have to do a whole theatrical breakdown of Maisel, which will be several parts because we couldn't possibly do it in one. They do they kind of do an homage to Carol Burnett singing Shy from Once Upon a Mattress. And Leslie Kritzer plays Carol Burnett on this episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And I just worked with her this past year in Spamalot. She's amazing. But that
Leslie Kritzer, she was in Beetlejuice.
She was also in Beetlejuice. Yes, with Carrie Butler. This world is so freaking small. But that is, I believe, Carol Burnett sang that song, which Princess Winifred sings, which Jackie Hoffman sang, which I watched Sutton Foster sing. It's just all
not even 6
so
degrees.
tied.
It's just
it's just one
degree.
So she actually had that in the last season of Maisel, which was filmed shortly before they started. And as you've mentioned, it takes so long for these productions to really come to fruition.
Yeah.
That this was shortly before they did the Encore's production of Once Upon a Mattress. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was all kind of linked together because it
was all starting then while brewing.
Yeah.
That would make so much sense. This is also fascinating.
Isn't it?
Everyone's connected.
Everyone's connected.
It's a small world after all. It's just like, you know, we are all one.
We are all one. So to bring us home, tell me about some of your favorite theater moments on Gilmore Girls.
There are so many.
There are too many to count.
Like honestly, like we have to start with Fiddler on the Roof.
When Brett watched that episode,
crazy, no?
Sounds crazy, no? Brett was dying over Kirk Gleason being in this production of Fiddler on the Roof.
like it just makes sense. Like the role of Tevye, it's a heavy role, so they had to get someone who could really do it.
A ringer.
But that was my introduction to Fiddler on the Roof. And like I know all of the words to all of the songs that are there because I watched this episode so many times, of course. But I love it. And if you listen to us on Patreon, we comment all the time that Amy loves Fiddler on the Roof, that she makes so many different references. And the one that's always the wildest to me is when Rory calls Sherry's friend, I think her name's Maureen, who like planned the baby shower and who like helped her organize when her birth was, that sort of thing. She has to go because she has Sheldon Harnick on the other line, who's the lyricist for Fiddler on the Roof. And it doesn't make sense because I think she works in like marketing or something. But I think Amy just like threw in a name.
Just wanted it in there.
That she threw in. Yeah.
That's so
and
funny.
I heard that in this rewatch and I was like, who's she calling? Why? What does she do?
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I love that.
What about you?
I mean, I love Jews and Chinese food. I love the Fiddler on the Roof of it all. But as we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, she loves a good theater reference, whether it's Fiddler on the Roof or West Side Story. And Jess's quips about West Side Story will always be my favorite.
Man loves West Side Story.
He loves a West Side Story comeback, especially when it comes to Dean. Like,
yeah.
But my dancing, like this is getting a little too West Side Story for me, Dean. I got to tell you, my dancing skills are not up to snuff. Like as a kid, I always used to just be like, man, I love him. You know?
Yeah. He's making theater references. He's a theater kid.
He's a theater kid.
Could you see Jess being a theater kid? He wants to be in West Side Story so bad.
He desperately wants to do the steps.
Yeah.
And then I found a man who looks like Milo Ventimiglia and performs in West Side Story. So full circle for me.
It just full circle for you. We love that.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on about the theatricalities I love about this show. And I have. I mean, like the dance marathon and the Shakespeare part of season 2 and like, you know, all of these big events that that Amy throws in that are inherently theatrical, like the Fiddler on the Roof. And just everything that she does feels like it's a little...
Lorelai, wasn't she Tevye?
Yes, at one point she was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof.
And a production.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're always throwing that in. And like the elementary school production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Like they always just make these references that I'm like, it just makes me feel so connected to the show.
Or they had done Jesus Christ Superstar the year before.
Exactly.
But I think that Jesus had a nut allergy.
Yes. And he ended up getting sick. It was just Judas and Pontius Pilate.
Stuck a peanut up his nose. Isn't that what it was?
He stuck a peanut up his nose. It was Judas and Pontius Pilate for all of Act 2. It's a disaster. But I love the theatricality of even like the Festival of Living Art and the We've Got Magic to Do, the Pippin of it all with Patty's dance recitals and just how much
to do just for you.
And just how much they incorporate that into the actual production value of the show, that Miss Patty's ballet school is always going. And she always has her like dancers be a part of even the, the engagement party for Max and Lorelai. I just think it's
the dancing apples
and
Apple down.
Apple Down and the Lazy Hazy Crazy Days of Summer, the tap dancers in the barbershop quartet. Like it's all so theatrical without being in your face a musical episode like you talked about with Grey's Anatomy. And
oh gosh, yes.
I love the subtlety of that.
Great because they were Broadway actors who did that. But there's just like, it's almost like it's a thread in the tapestry that is Gilmore Girls. If you took it out, it would change the just whole vibe of the show. Totally. But there's just this element to it that whether it's like a musicality or like a scene that feels like it could be a stage play that's being filmed for you. Like the one that I'm thinking of in particular that we just recently watched on Patreon is when Lorelai's standing at her front porch after her dad has brought her dollhouse. The way that she just like stands and leans against the banister on her porch, the railing, that just feels like you're in the back of the house watching her perform to all of us.
Yeah.
That I feel like it is so essential, not only in the references that are made and the writing of it all and the actor's background, but also just in the way that it's staged and directed.
Totally.
And it's in the core of it as much as anything else is.
Yeah, 100%. So thanks for going on this theater journey with me. Even if you're not a theater kid, I hope you really liked it. We did have some magic to do. There's nothing I love more than theater and Gilmore Girls. So it was really cool to combine those
popular.
two. Yeah, popular. Oh, I can't wait to see it. It's going to be so good.
I'm really excited.
But if you guys thought of any like fun facts, fun theater facts that maybe we left out,
or references that you like that we're not mentioning here.
Yeah, definitely let us know. Call in because we're going to do a few Gilmore to Considers over the winter holiday season, as we've mentioned a lot of times. So call in, let us know. Would love to hear if you have any like really deep niche fun theater facts about anybody on Gilmore Girls. That would be a lot of fun to share.
Or if you know of a role that you want to see Melissa McCarthy in,
let us know.
I want to know.
Yeah. Or another adaptation of a musical that you'd love to see Amy do.
Or another musical that you would like to see Kirk star in.
Ooh. We did talk about that on Patreon.
We did
for the Vicious Trollops only. But
Legally Kirk.
Legally Kirk, which Christian Borle was in. He was in Legally Blonde.
Yes.
Speaking of, full circle. But before we get to our winter GTCs, we are going to be doing a little winter episode next week, which I'm really excited about. What is that?
Yeah. We're going to review all of the winter finales and see which one was our favorite. Because we've almost watched all of them. We haven't seen the one for season 7. And winter finale being the episode that takes place right before the holidays. Like there's a hiatus in television right before the holidays, before we pick back up in January. So we're going to rank them and see which one is our favorite and see if they align.
And we'll have more to say on that in the next episode.